I still remember the exact tone of my mother's voice that morning. Not loud, not angry, just tired, like I was asking for something unreasonable. At the time, I was 28 years old, a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army stationed at Fort Carson. I had commissioned through ROTC at 22, deployed once to Kuwait, and thought I understood pressure. I did not. Pressure is briefing a colonel with 2 hours of sleep while your 8-week-old baby has been crying since midnight. My daughter Lily was born 2 months after I returned from deployment. Her father decided he preferred freedom over diapers. He made that decision quickly. I made mine slower. I stayed. I signed the birth certificate. I adjusted my family care plan. I kept showing up to work. That morning I hadn't slept more than 90 minutes at a time in weeks. Lily had a pediatric appointment across town. My left shoulder ached from holding her. My uniform blouse had a faint milk stain I hoped no one would notice later, and I could feel the edges of burnout creeping in. So I called my mom. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask her to move in. I asked if she and my dad could fly out for a week. Just long enough for me to catch up on sleep and not look like I was unraveling in front of my command. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, calm and flat, "You chose to have that baby while you're in the Army. That's not our responsibility." I stood in my kitchen staring at the wall like maybe I misheard her. I reminded her Lily was her granddaughter. She reminded me Ashley, my younger sister, was going through a hard time and needed them. Ashley was 26, living in Dallas, and had been finding herself for the past 8 years. Finding herself mostly involved maxing out credit cards and quitting jobs before lunch breaks were over. I didn't argue. Arguing takes energy, and I didn't have any left. I just said, okay, hung up, and strapped Lily into her car seat. Colorado mornings can look peaceful even when your life feels like a mess. The sky was clear. Traffic was light. I remember thinking that if I could just get through the appointment and maybe grab coffee, I'd survive another day. About 20 minutes later, at a busy intersection near Academy Boulevard, a pickup truck ran a red light. There wasn't time to react. The impact came from the driver's side. Metal crushed. Glass exploded. The car spun hard enough that my vision blurred. When everything stopped moving, the first thing I heard was Lily screaming. That sound cut through the ringing in my ears faster than any training ever could. My left arm burned. My head felt heavy. Smoke drifted up from the hood. I forced myself to turn around in the seat. She was still strapped in, crying, alive. I don't remember unlocking the door, but I remember a stranger's hands helping me out of the car. I remember someone saying the other driver smelled like alcohol. I remember trying to tell the paramedic I was active duty and needed my daughter checked first. At the hospital, they confirmed what I already felt. A fractured arm, mild concussion. Lily had bruises but no internal injuries. I lay there in a hospital gown, my dominant arm in a temporary cast, staring at the ceiling tiles that all look the same in every hospital in America. The nurse asked who could take the baby overnight while I stayed for observation. I called my parents again. This time, I didn't ease into it. I told them there had been a car accident. I told them I was in the hospital. I told them Lily was okay, but I couldn't physically lift her with one arm. There was another pause. Then my mother asked if I was serious, because Ashley was in the middle of an anxiety spiral and they couldn't just leave her. I waited for concern, for panic, for even basic grandparent instinct. What I got was, "We can't just drop everything." I stared at the white hospital curtain pulled halfway around my bed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I just said I understood and ended the call. It's strange how quickly your brain reorganizes itself when you realize you're alone. The nurse came back, clipboard in hand. I told her I would figure something out. I pulled up my phone with my good hand and started calling licensed childcare services. I found a temporary caregiver who could handle overnight newborn care. It wasn't cheap, but neither is pride. As I finalized the arrangements, I thought about something else. If I couldn't demonstrate stable childcare, my command could initiate a family care plan review. That's paperwork no single parent in uniform wants. Too many reviews, and your career can stall. Or worse. I had worked too hard to let exhaustion and someone else's indifference undo it. Around 9 that night, there was a knock on the hospital room door. I expected another nurse. Instead, my grandfather, Harold Thompson, walked in. He was in his late 70s, a Vietnam veteran who still stood straighter than most people half his age. He looked at my arm at Lily in the bassinet beside the bed, and then back at me. "Your mother told me everything was handled," he said quietly. "It is now," I answered. He didn't smile. He stepped closer to the bassinet and gently placed a hand near Lily's blanket, not touching, just hovering like he was guarding her. Then he asked me what had happened. Not the accident, the call. So I told him. I repeated my mother's words exactly. No drama, no commentary, just the sentence. He listened without interrupting. His jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't curse or raise his voice. He just nodded once. "I'll stay," he said. And for the first time that day, I felt something other than shock. Not relief. Not yet. Just the sense that someone had actually seen what happened. He pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down like he had nowhere else to be. Grandpa didn't ask if I wanted him there. He didn't offer advice. He just stayed. That alone felt different from every phone call I'd had that day. A nurse came in to check my vitals and glanced at him. "Family?" she asked. "Yes," he answered before I could. "I'm family." It was such a simple sentence, but it landed heavier than I expected. Once the room quieted again, he asked practical questions. How long would I be admitted? What did the doctors say about lifting restrictions? Who was taking the baby home tonight? I told him about the overnight caregiver I'd arranged. Licensed. Background checked. Expensive. He nodded once. "Good," he said. "You handled it." There was no pity in his voice. No disbelief that I'd been left to manage it alone. Just acknowledgement. I shifted slightly in the hospital bed and felt the ache shoot down my arm. It wasn't unbearable. It was inconvenient. And inconvenience has a way of exposing who shows up and who doesn't. Grandpa looked at Lily again. She had finally stopped crying and was asleep, her tiny fists clenched near her face like she was ready to fight the world if needed. "She's strong," he said. "She doesn't have a choice," I replied. He didn't argue with that. After a few minutes, he asked quietly, "What exactly did your mother say?" Not what happened. Not how I felt. What she said. I repeated it word for word. I didn't soften it. I didn't explain it away. "You chose to have that baby while you're in the Army. That's not our responsibility." He didn't react right away. He leaned back in the chair and exhaled slowly. His eyes didn't leave the bassinet. "I raised her better than that," he said. There was no anger in his tone. Just disappointment. The kind that runs deeper than yelling. I shrugged with my good shoulder. "It's fine. I'll figure it out." He looked at me then. Really looked. "You always do." That was true. I always did. I had figured it out when Lily's father left. I figured it out when daycare waitlists stretched 3 months long. I figured it out when my command required updated family care plan paperwork after I returned from maternity leave. The Army doesn't operate on sympathy. It operates on readiness. If you can't deploy, if you can't maintain stability at home, someone else takes your slot. I had no intention of being that someone. Grandpa stayed until nearly midnight. When the caregiver arrived to take Lily home for the night, he walked her through everything like he was conducting a pre-mission brief. Feeding schedule, pediatrician contact, emergency numbers. He asked for her license, checked it, memorized her name. The nurse watched him and smiled. "You military?" she asked. Was he said. "Once you've done it, it sticks." Before he left, he stood beside my bed again. "I'll be in town for a few days," he said. "We'll get you settled." I almost told him he didn't have to, that I didn't need rescuing. But I didn't. I just nodded. When he walked out, I stared at the empty doorway for a long time. Around 2 in the morning, I couldn't sleep. Concussions make everything feel slightly off, like your brain is half a second behind the world. I picked up my phone and saw 3 missed calls from my mother. No voicemail. I debated calling back. Part of me still hoped she would say she'd changed her mind, that she and Dad were booking a flight. Instead, I received a text. How serious is it Ashley's really struggling tonight? I set the phone down on the bedside table. Ashley had been really struggling for as long as I could remember. Struggling through college. Struggling through jobs. Struggling through relationships. Every struggle seemed to require my parents' full emotional and financial deployment. Mine apparently required self-sufficiency. The next morning, my battalion XO called. News travels fast when it involves one of your officers and a DUI crash. He asked if I was okay. He asked about Lily. Then he asked about childcare coverage and whether my family care plan needed updating. Straight to the point. That's how the Army works. I told him I had temporary coverage secured and would submit updated paperwork once discharged. He paused for a second, then said, "Take care of your kid. We'll handle the rest here." It wasn't warm. It wasn't personal. But it was support. Later that afternoon, Grandpa came back with a small duffel bag. He had driven to my apartment, packed a few essentials, and brought my breast pump and Lily's favorite blanket. "You forgot this," he said, holding up the blanket like evidence. I smiled for the first time in 24 hours. He didn't mention my parents. Not once. But I noticed something else. When he thought I wasn't looking, he stepped into the hallway and made a phone call. His voice was low, controlled, measured. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the tone. It was the tone he used when something crossed a line. When he came back into the room, he didn't explain who he had called or what he had said. He just sat down again, folded his hands, and watched over the space like he was guarding a perimeter. For the first time since the crash, the room felt steady. Not fixed. Not safe. Just steady. And that was enough for the moment. He stayed in Colorado longer than he originally planned. Grandpa had driven up from Oklahoma in his old Ford pickup, the kind that still had a CD player and a faint smell of motor oil, no matter how many times you cleaned it. He told me he'd head back in a couple of days. Instead, he extended his hotel stay without making a big announcement about it. By the 3rd day, I was discharged with a sling and strict instructions not to lift anything heavier than my baby, which, as it turns out, includes my baby most of the time. Grandpa drove me home from the hospital. He carried Lily's car seat like it weighed nothing and walked into my apartment like he was conducting an inspection. The place wasn't messy. It just looked like what it was, one exhausted lieutenant trying to keep it together. Bottles drying by the sink, a stack of unopened mail, a whiteboard on the fridge with feeding times written in dry erase marker. He didn't comment. He just set Lily down gently and asked where I kept the trash bags. While he took out the trash and wiped down counters, I sat at the kitchen table and signed paperwork for my temporary caregiver extension. The numbers added up fast. Overnight care, even short-term, isn't cheap. But neither is losing your career. At some point, he asked almost casually, "Have your parents called since I shook my head?" Just texts. Checking in on Ashley. He didn't respond to that. He rinsed out a bottle, set it on the rack, and dried his hands slowly. Later that afternoon, he told me he needed to run an errand. He didn't specify what kind. Just grabbed his keys and left. I assumed he was heading back to the hotel. He wasn't. Over the next few days, I started noticing small changes in his tone when he asked questions. Not about me. About them. "Your mom mentioned they're tight on money lately," he said one evening while rocking Lily so I could shower. "That true?" "That's what she says," I answered. "Apparently they've been helping me." He stopped rocking for half a second. "Helping you?" "Yeah. That's the story." I had heard it from a cousin a month before the accident. My aunt in Houston had apparently told someone at church that my parents were stretching their retirement to support their single Army daughter and her baby. I almost laughed when I heard that. The only thing my parents had sent since Lily was born was a onesie that said Grandma's Girl. It still had the tag on it. Grandpa didn't laugh. The next morning he left again. This time he came back with a thin manila folder tucked under his arm. He didn't open it right away. He set it on the kitchen counter and asked if I needed help updating my family care plan forms. We went through them together. Designated caregiver, emergency contacts, power of attorney. Everything had to be airtight. The Army doesn't care why your support system fails. It only cares that you have one. That night after Lily finally fell asleep, he sat across from me at the table and opened the folder. Inside were printouts, public records, property filings, a refinance document dated 2 years earlier. They refinanced the house, I asked. He nodded, and then again he added, sliding another page toward me. I stared at the numbers. My parents' mortgage balance had gone up, not down. Cash out refinance, twice, for what I asked. He didn't answer directly. He handed me a credit court filing with Ashley's name on it. Unpaid balance, $48,000, multiple credit cards. I felt something shift in my chest, but it wasn't anger. It was clarity. They told people they were helping me, I said quietly. They are helping someone, he replied. I leaned back in my chair. So they're draining retirement for Ashley. He didn't soften it. Yes. We sat in silence for a moment. I'm not asking them for anything, I said. I never have. I know, he answered. There was no lecture about family loyalty, no speech about forgiveness, just facts laid out on a table between us. He closed the folder slowly. They expect you to bail them out later, he said. The sentence didn't surprise me. It explained things. Every time my mom made a comment about my Army career finally paying off, every time my dad joked about having one successful kid, it wasn't pride. It was planning. They think once you make field grade you'll step in, Grandpa continued. They see you as stable, responsible, predictable. I am predictable, I said. I pay my bills. He almost smiled. That's not the same thing. I looked toward the hallway where Lily was sleeping. My arm throbbed dully under the sling. What are you going to do? I asked him. He folded his hands on the table, fingers interlocked like he was thinking through logistics. I'm not going to argue with them, he said. Arguing won't change habits. He stood up, gathered the papers, and slid them back into the folder. But I am going to make sure your daughter isn't tied to those habits. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The next morning, he told me he had an appointment with an attorney before driving back to Oklahoma. He kept it simple. Estate planning. Routine update. Routine, he repeated. Before he left, he stood at the door with his keys in hand and looked at me for a long moment. You focus on getting back on your feet, he said. And back to work. I nodded. He glanced down the hallway toward Lily's room. I'll handle the rest. Then he walked out, closing the door gently behind him. I signed back into the battalion with a sling on my left arm and a stack of updated paperwork in my right hand. The building smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner, exactly the same as it had before the accident. That was the strange part. My life had shifted, but the Army hadn't even blinked. My company commander glanced at my arm, then at the documents. You good to work? He asked. Yes, sir. That was the standard exchange. No sympathy, no dramatics. Just capability assessment. I had already submitted the police report confirming the other driver was charged with DUI. I had updated my family care plan. I had proof of temporary childcare coverage and a long-term contract with a licensed provider near base. Everything documented. Everything controlled. That's how you survive in uniform as a single parent. Not with emotion, with paperwork. The first week back was humbling. Typing one-handed is slower than you think. Carrying a laptop with your non-dominant arm feels like a workout. I learned how to open doors with my hip and balance a coffee cup without spilling it across classified slides. No one offered to lighten my workload. And honestly, I didn't want them to. The fastest way to stall a promotion track is to look fragile. At lunch one day, a senior NCO asked how the baby was doing. She's good, I answered. And your folks? he added casually. They're busy. He nodded in a way that said he understood more than I'd explained. That week I received an email from Brigade S1 reminding me about my upcoming Captain Board packet deadline. Performance evaluations, physical fitness record, medical clearance. The concussion required documentation confirming full recovery. No cognitive deficits, no lingering symptoms. I went to every appointment, passed every test. The Army doesn't care how tired you are. It cares whether you meet the standard. At home, life moved in tighter circles. Wake up, feed Lily, drop her at childcare. PT, work, pick her up, feed, laundry, emails, repeat. Grandpa called every few days, never asking for details about my parents. He asked about Lily's sleep schedule, my arm's healing progress, whether I'd secured long-term daycare coverage near post. He never once said I told you so. My parents, on the other hand, texted sporadically. Pictures of Ashley at brunch, updates about her job search, casual mentions of how expensive everything had become. One message stood out. We're stretching pretty thin helping your sister right now. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before locking my phone. Stretching thin. Meanwhile, I was calculating childcare costs down to the dollar and scheduling pumping breaks between logistics meetings about supply chain delays. There's a difference between struggling and choosing chaos. I was struggling. Ashley was choosing. A month after I returned to duty, my cast came off. Physical therapy started immediately. I needed full range of motion documented for my medical file. The therapist asked if I had family nearby to help with the baby during recovery. No, I said. Just me. She nodded like she'd heard that before. One evening, after Lily finally fell asleep, I opened my bank app and reviewed my monthly expenses. Rent, utilities, childcare, gas, student loan minimums. I noticed something else. For the past year, I had been sending small transfers to my parents. Not because they asked directly, but because every phone call ended with some version of "we're just trying to keep Ashley afloat." 500 here, 800 there. Nothing dramatic, just steady. I stared at the transaction history. 10 months, over $6,000. It wasn't ruining me, but it wasn't nothing. I thought about the hospital bed, the words "not our responsibility." I thought about Grandpa's folder, the refinance documents, the credit card balances. I closed the app and opened my scheduled transfers. Then I deleted them. No speech, no announcement, just a quiet adjustment. The next morning, my mother called. "Did you mean to cancel the deposit?" she asked. "Yes." Silence. "We're counting on that." I leaned against the kitchen counter, Lily on my hip. "I'm counting on myself." Another silence. Heavier this time. "You're doing well in the Army now," she said carefully. "It's only fair to help." Fair. I almost laughed. Instead, I shifted Lily to my other arm and said, "I have my own household." That ended the call. The next few weeks were tense but quiet. No dramatic blow-ups, just distance. I focused on preparing my Captain Board file. Every evaluation bullet mattered. Deployment performance, leadership comments, physical readiness scores. I trained harder than I needed to, not because I had something to prove to them, but because I refused to let distractions slow me down. One afternoon, my mentor, a major in the logistics branch, pulled me aside after a meeting. "You look tired," he said. "Newborn," I answered. He nodded, then added, "Helping family is fine. Enabling them isn't." I didn't tell him about the transfers I'd just stopped. I didn't need to. By the end of the quarter, my board packet was complete. My arm had nearly full strength again. Lily had started sleeping in longer stretches. Life wasn't easier. It was structured. And structure is something I understand. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I found out I made captain in the middle of a field exercise. There's nothing glamorous about promotion notifications. No music, no spotlight, just an email and a few handshakes between equipment inspections. I read the message twice to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting it. Selected. That was it. Years of work reduced to one word. I stood there for a moment, helmet tucked under my arm, and felt something steady settle in my chest. Not pride exactly, more like confirmation. The plan was working. That night I called Grandpa first. "Captain Carter," he said after I told him. He didn't overreact. He never did. He just sounded satisfied, like a forecast had come through exactly as expected. My parents heard about it a week later through a relative. My mother texted congratulations, followed by a comment about how all that Army effort is finally paying off. There was no mention of the hospital, no acknowledgement of the canceled transfers, just a subtle shift in tone. Suddenly, I wasn't the overwhelmed single mom anymore. I was the one with upward mobility. Life moved forward in clean, measurable increments. I completed the logistics captain's career course. I adjusted to the new level of responsibility. More planning, more oversight, fewer excuses allowed. At home, Lily grew into routines of her own. Daycare became preschool. Bottles turned into sippy cups. I built my schedule around PT at dawn and bedtime stories at 8. The Army teaches you to anticipate problems before they happen. I applied that at home too. Emergency savings account, updated insurance policies, clear beneficiary designations, every document organized in a fireproof folder. Control what you can. Meanwhile, Texas stayed loud. Ashley bounced between jobs. One month she was launching a marketing startup. The next she was moving back in with my parents because rent was temporary stress. I stopped sending money entirely. The first year after I cut off transfers, my mom called more often. Conversations that started with small talk eventually curved toward expenses. Utility bills, unexpected car repairs, medical deductibles. Each time I kept my answers neutral. I had my own budget, my own childcare, my own mortgage goals. By year 3 as a captain, I PCS'd to Virginia. Moving as a single parent in the Army requires the kind of logistical planning that would impress NASA. I coordinated pack-out dates, temporary lodging, daycare wait lists, and in-processing briefs while Lily asked if the movers were stealing our couch. We landed in a modest 3-bedroom house purchased with a VA loan. Nothing flashy, just stable. I remember standing in the empty living room the first night after the movers left. Boxes everywhere. Lily asleep upstairs. I ran my hand across the bare wall and thought, this is ours. No one helped me with the down payment. No one co-signed. No one rescued me from paperwork. I built it one paycheck at a time. Grandpa visited that summer. He walked through the house slowly, inspecting like he always did. "Solid," he said, tapping the doorframe. "Good bones." We sat on the back porch after Lily went to bed. I updated my estate plan, he mentioned casually. I nodded. Estate planning was his favorite topic. Most people his age talked about golf. He talked about asset allocation. "Everything's squared away," he added. "I'm glad," I said. He looked at me for a moment as if weighing whether to say more, then shifted the conversation to Lily's school district. He didn't need to explain. I trusted him. Over the next few years, my career kept climbing in predictable steps. Strong evaluations, solid OERs, no disciplinary flags, no financial red marks on my clearance reviews. I applied for and completed a master's degree using my GI Bill. It wasn't glamorous either. Late-night assignments after Lily went to sleep, discussion boards at midnight, coffee in industrial quantities. But degrees don't argue with you. They don't compare you to your sibling. They just require work. By the time I hit 16 years of service, I pinned on major. That promotion felt different. Field grade means scrutiny increases, expectations rise, leadership decisions ripple wider. It also meant my base pay crossed into 6 figures. I didn't post about it, didn't celebrate online. But word travels in families faster than social media. My mother called the week after the promotion list was published. "We're proud of you," she said. It sounded practiced. In the background, I could hear Ashley talking loudly about something unrelated. "Thanks," I replied. There was a pause, then a familiar turn. "You're in a much better position now than we are." I didn't respond immediately. Better position. In Texas, my father had refinanced the house again. Property values had dipped slightly. Ashley had gone through a short marriage that ended faster than it started. Legal fees weren't cheap. I knew more than they thought I did. Grandpa called me later that month. "How are they?" he asked. "Predictable," I answered. He made a low sound in his throat that might have been agreement. He was getting older by then. His voice carried a slight rasp it hadn't before, but his mind remained sharp. "I'm glad you built something stable," he said. "I had to," I replied. He didn't argue with that. A year later, we buried him in a small cemetery outside Tulsa. The service was simple. Military honors, folded flag, a bugle echoing across open land. My parents stood a few rows ahead of me. Ashley wore oversized sunglasses and checked her phone twice during the ceremony. I held Lily's hand the entire time. After the burial, there were quiet conversations in the shade. My mom mentioned that settling estates is complicated. My dad talked about how much responsibility falls on family when someone passes. I listened without reacting. I knew Grandpa had everything organized. He always did. When we drove away from the cemetery, Lily asked if Great-Grandpa was in the sky now. I told her he was at peace. Back in Virginia, life resumed its structured rhythm. Morning PT, school drop-offs, budget reviews, staff meetings. Texas grew quieter for a while, and I kept building. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing a supply shortfall report. My phone lit up with my mother's name. I almost ignored it. We hadn't spoken in a few months. Our conversations had settled into polite distance the kind families use when no one wants to admit anything out loud. I stepped into the hallway outside the conference room and answered. Her voice sounded different. Not softer, smaller. "Are you busy?" "I'm at work." A pause. I could hear her breathing uneven. "We need to talk." Those words usually mean someone is sick, or someone is in trouble. Sometimes both. "What's going on?" Another pause, longer this time. "Your father lost his job." That didn't shock me. Corporate downsizing had been circulating in his industry for years. He was in his early 60s. Senior. Expensive. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. She continued quickly, like if she didn't say it all at once, she wouldn't say it at all. "The mortgage company sent a notice. We're behind. The refinance didn't go through. And Ashley," she trailed off. "And Ashley," I prompted. "She's struggling again." Of course she was. I leaned against the wall and stared at the beige paint in front of me. Nothing dramatic happened inside me. No anger spike. No satisfaction. Just a quiet alignment of puzzle pieces. "How far behind?" I asked. 3 months. That meant foreclosure proceedings were likely already in motion. Banks don't wait patiently. "We were hoping," she said carefully, "that maybe you could help. Just until your dad finds something." There it was. Not apology, not acknowledgement of the hospital, not reflection. Help. I thought about my current LES statement sitting on my desk. Major pay scale, 16 years of service. Stable, predictable, hard-earned. I thought about the VA mortgage on my own house, Lily's school tuition, my retirement contributions, and I thought about the refinance documents Grandpa had shown me years ago. How much, I asked. Another pause, this one heavier. We'd need about $80,000 to catch up and settle some other debts. $80,000. That wasn't cover the electric bill. That was structural damage. I didn't respond immediately. "We always believed family helps family," she added, like she was offering a principle instead of a request. The irony hung between us. "Does Ashley work right now?" I asked. "She's looking." That answer told me everything. I exhaled slowly. Let me look at my schedule. Silence again. "Maybe you could come visit," I said. "We can talk in person." She sounded relieved. "You'd have us?" "Yes." After we hung up, I stood there for a few seconds longer than necessary. Then I walked back into the conference room and resumed discussing supply chain delays like nothing had shifted. But something had. That evening I ran the numbers. I could technically write the check. It wouldn't bankrupt me. It would hurt, but it wouldn't destroy my finances. That wasn't the real issue. The real issue was pattern. 10 years earlier, I was in a hospital bed asking for a week of childcare. I didn't need $80,000. I needed presence. Now they needed money. A lot of it. I opened my laptop and pulled up public property records. The house in Texas showed 2 refinances over the past decade. The current balance was higher than when Grandpa first showed me those documents. I checked court filings. Ashley's divorce had finalized 6 months earlier. No spousal support. Credit issues still visible. None of this surprised me. What surprised me was how calm I felt. Later that night, Lily sat at the kitchen table doing math homework. She was 10 now. Taller, confident, organized. Grandma called, she asked casually. She did. Is everything okay? They're having some money problems. Lily nodded slowly, processing that in the straightforward way kids do. Are we okay? She asked. Yes, I answered immediately. And that was true. The following week, my parents and Ashley booked flights to Virginia. I didn't tell them anything about my finances. I didn't promise anything. I just gave them the address and a dinner time. On base, no one knew anything was happening. I kept my routine exactly the same. PT at 0600. Staff sync at 0900. Budget review at 1400. Control what you can. The night before they arrived, I walked through the house making small adjustments. Nothing theatrical, just normal hosting tasks. Extra towels in the guest room, groceries restocked, lawn trimmed. This wasn't about showing off. It was about clarity. When you build something stable, you don't have to exaggerate it. The next afternoon, I drove to the airport. My parents looked older than I remembered. Stress does that. Ashley walked behind them, sunglasses on despite being indoors scrolling through her phone. They hugged Lily first, then me. The embrace was polite, brief. On the drive back to my house, my mother commented on how nice the area was. My father asked about property taxes. Ashley said nothing. We pulled into my driveway just before sunset. They stepped out of the car and looked at the house. Not a mansion, not flashy, just solid. Inside, Lily gave them a quick tour. Her room, the backyard, the small office where I handled army work from home when needed. During dinner, conversations circled around safe topics: school, weather, military moves. Eventually, my father cleared his throat. We didn't want to burden you over the phone, he said. But it's serious. I set my fork down. How serious, I asked, even though I already knew. The bank's moving fast, he admitted. We don't have much time. Ashley finally looked up. You're doing really well now, she said. This wouldn't even dent you. The room went quiet. I looked at each of them one at a time. Then I stood up from the table and walked toward my office. I opened the drawer in my desk and took out the folder Grandpa had mailed to me 3 years earlier. It had been sitting there untouched, except for annual updates to my own records. Thick paper, legal tabs, clean signatures. I carried it back to the dining room without rushing. No one spoke while I walked in. I set the folder down on the table between the plates and glasses. My father's eyes followed it. My mother straightened slightly in her chair. Ashley leaned back like she was bored. What's that? She asked. Paperwork, I replied. I opened it carefully and turned it toward them. These are Grandpa's estate documents. My mother blinked. We already settled his estate. Yes, I said. You settled what was yours. Silence. I slid the first page forward. Trust formation documents. Irrevocable trust. Date stamp from a year after my accident. My father leaned in. What is this? This is the trust Grandpa created for Lily. Ashley frowned. For Lily? Yes. I let that sit. The trust summary was clear. Beneficiary, Lily Carter. Grantor, Harold Thompson. Trustee, independent fiduciary in Oklahoma. Funding amount just under $1.7 million in long-term investments, plus the lake property outside Tulsa. My mother's face shifted first. Not anger, confusion. He never mentioned that, she said. He wouldn't, I answered. Ashley reached for the page and scanned it quickly. So what does this have to do with us? Everything and nothing, I said calmly. My father looked at me sharply. Megan? I kept my tone steady. Grandpa created this trust after my accident. My mother stiffened. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. He was concerned. I continued. Not about money, about patterns. Ashley let out a short laugh. What patterns? I met her eyes. Refinances, credit cards, assumptions. My father's jaw tightened. Assumptions that I would eventually fix things. The room cooled several degrees. My mother folded her hands together. We never assumed you'd fix anything. I didn't argue. I simply tapped the document. This trust is irrevocable. It cannot be redirected. It cannot be borrowed against. It cannot be used to pay off third-party debts resulting from financial mismanagement. Ashley rolled her eyes. That's dramatic. It's legal, I replied. My father leaned back in his chair. Are you saying you won't help us because of this? I'm saying this was never mine to use. That part mattered. The money wasn't mine. It never had been. Grandpa had structured it that way deliberately. My mother's voice sharpened. You're sitting on almost $2 million and telling us you can't help. I'm not sitting on anything I said. Lily is. Ashley laughed again, louder this time. She's 10. Yes. The absurdity of that statement seemed to land differently for each of them. My father rubbed his forehead. We're about to lose the house. I know, I said. And you're going to let that happen. I held his gaze. I didn't cause it. My mother leaned forward. Family helps family. There it was again. The slogan. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch long enough that it became uncomfortable. 10 years ago, I said evenly, I was in a hospital bed with a broken arm. Lily was 8 weeks old. Ashley shifted in her chair. I asked for 1 week of help. My mother looked away. You told me she wasn't your responsibility. No raised voice, no accusation, just repetition. My father inhaled slowly. That was different. How she wasn't our financial responsibility. I almost smiled. The wording had changed, but the meaning hadn't. You're right, I said. She wasn't. Ashley crossed her arms. You're really going to compare that to this? Yes. The word landed flat and solid. You made choices, I continued. Refinances, covering Ashley's debts, ignoring long-term consequences. Ashley snapped, You don't know what it's like. I looked at her calmly. I know exactly what it's like to clean up your own mess. My father's voice dropped. This is cruel. No, I said. Cruel is telling a new mother her baby isn't your problem. The table went quiet again. My mother's eyes were glossy now, but no tears fell. We were overwhelmed, she said softly. So was I. That was the difference. I didn't have backup. Ashley pushed her chair back slightly. You think you're better than us because you wear a uniform. No, I answered. I think consequences matter. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. My father's shoulders slumped a little. For the first time that night, he looked less defensive and more tired. What are we supposed to do? He asked. It wasn't a challenge. It was a real question. Sell the house, I said. My mother flinched. Downsize. Rent. Adjust your lifestyle. Ashley shook her head. That's humiliating. Losing a house isn't humiliation, I replied. It's math. No one had a response to that. I closed the folder gently and slid it back toward myself. This isn't revenge, I said. It's boundaries. Ashley scoffed. Feels like revenge. I stood up slowly. It feels like adulthood. Lily's footsteps echoed from the hallway as she walked toward the kitchen. "Is it dessert time?" she asked brightly. I looked down at her and smiled. "Yeah," I said. "It is." Behind her, 3 adults sat in silence. Lily climbed into her seat and started talking about a math test like nothing unusual had happened. That's the thing about kids. They don't measure tension the way adults do. They measure consistency. As long as dinner is on the table and someone listens, the world feels stable. I cut a slice of pie and set it in front of her. Behind us, my parents and Ashley hadn't moved. My mother finally spoke. "So that's it. You just close a folder and we're supposed to accept this." I stayed focused on Lily's plate. "Accept what?" "That you're choosing money over family." I turned back toward the table slowly. "I'm choosing structure over chaos." My father's voice was lower now, almost pleading. "We didn't know he did this." "I know." "Then how is this fair?" I leaned against the counter. "Fair would have been showing up when I needed you." Ashley made a sharp sound under her breath. "You're never going to let that go." "No," I said calmly. "I'm not. Not because I'm bitter. Because I remember. There's a difference." My mother pressed her lips together. "He didn't trust us. He trusted discipline," I replied. That landed harder than anything else I'd said. For years, Grandpa had watched quietly. He didn't confront. He adjusted. He saw the pattern early and moved around it. My father looked at the trust documents again. We're his children. And Lily was his great-granddaughter, I said. He made his choice. Ashley shook her head. He punished us. No, I corrected. He protected her. The distinction mattered. My mother stared at the page listing the trustee's contact information. Can't you at least explain the situation? It's irrevocable, I said. That's the point. My father rubbed his temples. So we're just supposed to start over at 60. You're supposed to adjust, I answered. Ashley pushed her chair back fully this time. You've always been cold. That almost made me laugh. Cold would have been hanging up 10 years ago and never answering again. Cold would have been cutting them out of Lily's life entirely. This wasn't cold. This was measured. You're a major now, Ashley continued. You make good money. You live in a nice house. This wouldn't even hurt you. There it was again. The assumption that my stability existed for redistribution. It would hurt me, I said, and it would teach Lily the wrong lesson. My mother looked at me sharply. What lesson? That no matter how many bad decisions you make, someone else will clean them up. Silence again. Lily finished her dessert and asked if she could go outside for a few minutes before bedtime. I nodded. She slipped past the tension without noticing it. When the back door closed, my father spoke more quietly. We didn't think it would get this bad. I believed that part. Most financial collapses don't start with disaster. They start with convenience. One refinance, one balance transfer, one more chance for someone who promises they'll fix it next time. I'm not rooting for you to fail, I said. Ashley crossed her arms. Sure feels like it. If I wanted you to fail, I wouldn't have invited you here. That slowed her down. My mother's voice softened. What are we supposed to tell people? I blinked. The truth. She looked almost offended by the suggestion. My father glanced toward the window where Lily was kicking a soccer ball in the yard. You really won't reconsider, I met his eyes. No. The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. He nodded once, absorbing it. For the first time that night, no one argued. My mother gathered her purse slowly. Ashley checked her phone again, this time without attitude. My father closed the folder gently and slid it back toward me without comment. As they stood to leave the table, my mother paused. He never told us he was disappointed, she said. He didn't have to, I replied. That was the difference between yelling and action. Grandpa had never raised his voice. He had simply reallocated his trust, both emotional and financial. At the front door, my father hesitated. If we lose the house, he began. You'll still have each other, I said. That sounded almost kind. It wasn't meant to be cruel. Ashley stepped outside first. My mother followed. My father lingered a second longer. "You've changed," he said. "Yes," I answered. He didn't ask how. After the door closed, I stood in the quiet entryway for a moment. The house felt the same as it had an hour earlier. Stable, solid, mine. I walked to the backyard where Lily was lining up a shot toward the small goal we'd set up last summer. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes." She kicked the ball and missed slightly. "Do Grandma and Grandpa need help?" she asked. "They need to make some changes," I said. She nodded like that made sense. Like when I forget my homework and have to fix it myself. Exactly like that. She seemed satisfied with the comparison and chased the ball across the grass. Inside the house, the dining table still held faint impressions of dinner plates. I picked up the folder and returned it to my desk drawer. It felt lighter than it had earlier. Not because the situation was simple. Because it was clear. The house felt quieter after they left, but not lighter. I locked the front door and stood there for a second, hand still on the knob. Not shaking. Not second-guessing. Just aware that something had shifted permanently. Lily came inside a few minutes later, cheeks flushed from running. "Are they mad?" she asked. "They're frustrated," I answered. She nodded like that was a reasonable adult emotion and went upstairs to get ready for bed. I cleaned the kitchen slowly. Not to stall, just to return everything to our order. Plates into the dishwasher, glasses rinsed, chairs pushed back in place. Order matters to me. It always has. My phone buzzed while I was wiping down the counter. "Ashley." I let it ring once before answering. "You humiliated them," she said immediately. "No, you made them feel small." I leaned against the counter again. "I didn't make any financial decisions for them." "You could fix this," she pushed. "I could delay it," I corrected. Silence on the other end. "You've always thought you were better," she added. "That's not true." "It is. You and your army discipline." There it was again. The uniform is personality. "I don't think I'm better," I said calmly. "I think I make different choices." She exhaled sharply. "So that's it. We lose the house. You sell the house." "You don't get it," she snapped. "That house is everything." I thought about my first apartment near Fort Carson, about the hospital bed, about the nights I balanced bills at the kitchen table with one arm in a sling. "A house is a structure," I said. "Everything else is behavior." She hung up without another word. I set my phone down and finished cleaning. The next morning, my mother called. Her voice wasn't angry this time. It was tired. "Your father barely slept," she said. "I'm sorry. We didn't think it would end like this." "It hasn't ended," I replied. She hesitated. "You really don't feel any responsibility." There it was. The word again. I didn't rush my answer. 10 years ago, I said evenly, I was told my newborn wasn't your responsibility. Silence. I was told I chose that life. She didn't interrupt. "I chose this life too," I continued. "And I've handled it." She inhaled slowly. We were overwhelmed back then. So was I. Another pause. "You're punishing us," she said quietly. "No," I answered. "I'm applying the same standard." That was the power reversal. Not yelling, not revenge speeches, just consistency. "You think losing our home is a lesson?" she asked. "I think actions have outcomes." My mother let out a long breath. "We thought once you were established you'd help more." "I helped when I could," I said. Then I stopped enabling. She didn't argue with that. Maybe because she knew it was true. After we hung up, I drove Lily to school like any other morning. Traffic lights, radio news, backpack in the passenger seat. Normal life doesn't pause for family collapse. At work, I reviewed training schedules and supply forecasts. I briefed a colonel on projected equipment timelines. No one in that room knew my parents were facing foreclosure. And that was the point. My stability wasn't dependent on their approval anymore. That afternoon, my father texted, "We've decided to list the house." I read it twice. "Okay," I replied. A few minutes later, another message. "Never thought it would come to this. I stared at the screen before typing back. It doesn't have to be the worst thing. He didn't respond. That evening, Lily and I sat at the dining table working through her science project. She was building a small model about renewable energy. Solar panels made of cardboard and aluminum foil. Grandma sounded sad, she said. She is. Are we still family? Yes. That answer didn't require hesitation. Family doesn't disappear when money does. It just reveals what it actually is. Later that night, after Lily went to bed, I sat on the back porch alone. The air was cool, the neighborhood quiet. I thought about the hospital room 10 years earlier, about the sling. The nurse asking who could take my baby. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was clear. Clear that love without accountability turns into dependency. Clear that money given without boundaries becomes expectation. Clear that responsibility isn't something you can assign to whoever looks most stable. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a group message from extended family. Word had traveled fast. An aunt asking if everything was okay. A cousin suggesting we all come together. I typed one sentence. They're handling it. No defense. No explanation. Just truth. Inside the house, the lights glowed warm against the dark yard. 10 years ago, I lay in a hospital bed trying to convince myself I could do this alone. Tonight, I didn't need convincing. I stood up, went inside, and locked the door. The foreclosure notice never came. Instead, 3 weeks after dinner, the house in Texas went on the market. My father sent the listing link without commentary. 3-bedroom ranch. Updated kitchen from the second refinance. Motivated seller in the description. I looked at the photos carefully. The living room where we opened Christmas presents. The hallway where Ashley and I measured our height against the wall. The backyard where my dad tried to teach me how to throw a football and eventually gave up. It was just a house. Memory doesn't live in drywall. They lowered the price twice before it sold. Not a dramatic loss. Just less than they'd hoped. Enough to pay off the remaining mortgage and clear part of the secondary debts. Not enough to restore the retirement accounts that had been drained over the years. They moved into a 2-bedroom rental 30 minutes outside Dallas. No pool, no large yard, no extra bedroom for when Ashley gets back on her feet. Ashley moved in with them. That part didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was the shift in tone. My mother called one evening while I was folding laundry. "We signed the lease today," she said. "How does it feel, smaller?" That wasn't bitterness, just fact. "It's manageable," she added. Manageable is an underrated word. My father got a contract job a month later. Lower salary, fewer benefits, still work. Ashley found part-time employment at a marketing firm. Remote, flexible hours. For the first time in years, no one asked me for money. There were awkward conversations with extended family. A cousin pulled me aside at a wedding that summer. "You couldn't help them at all," she asked. "I helped by not interfering," I answered. She didn't fully understand, but she nodded politely. The narrative shifted slowly. From Megan refused to, they had to adjust. Adjustment isn't glamorous. It's humbling. It's uncomfortable. It's necessary. Back in Virginia, my life stayed structured. Morning PT runs, staff meetings, Lily's soccer games on Saturdays, grocery lists on Sundays. One evening, Lily and I were cleaning out the garage when she found the old car seat from the accident. I had kept it for documentation, then forgot about it. She dragged it out into the light. "This was in the crash?" she asked. "Yes." She ran her hand along the plastic edge. "Were you scared I considered that?" "I was busy," I said. She seemed to accept that answer. Later that night, after she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and opened the drawer where Grandpa's folder still rested. I didn't look at the numbers. I looked at his signature. Harold Thompson. He never confronted my parents, never shamed them, never gave a speech about disappointment. He changed the structure instead. Structure outlasts emotion. A few months after they moved, my parents visited again. No crisis this time. No financial agenda. They stayed in the guest room, brought groceries, helped Lily with homework. My mother washed dishes without being asked. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a movie reconciliation. It was small and practical. One afternoon, my father stood in the backyard watching Lily practice soccer drills. "She's disciplined," he said. "She has to be," I replied. He nodded. "I should have flown out that day," he added quietly. I didn't respond immediately. "Yes," I said finally. No lecture, no emotional breakdown, just acknowledgement. That was enough. Ashley visited once that year. She kept the conversation surface level. Talked about her new job. Complained less. She never apologized. I never asked her to. Accountability doesn't always arrive wrapped in words. Sometimes it shows up in changed behavior. The trust remained untouched. Lily knew about it in general terms. Great-grandpa left me something for when I'm older, she would tell friends with a shrug. She didn't understand the deeper reason yet. She didn't need to. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching the sun set behind the trees, Lily asked a question that caught me off guard. "Are you mad at Grandma and Grandpa?" "No," I said. "Were you—" I thought about the hospital room, the sling, the nurse asking who could take my baby. "Yes," I answered honestly. "For a while." What changed? I stopped expecting them to be different. She processed that quietly. "That sounds kind of sad," she said. "It's honest," I replied. Honesty isn't always sad. Sometimes it's freeing. Inside the house, everything was calm. Bills paid. Schedules posted on the fridge. No urgent phone calls. I didn't win anything. I didn't lose anything either. I built something stable. And when tested, it held. 10 years ago, I was told my newborn wasn't their responsibility. Now I understood something clearly. She never was. She was mine. And that was enough. I don't tell this story because I enjoy family drama. I tell it because a lot of people quietly live through the same thing and think they're the only ones. When my parents said my newborn wasn't their responsibility, that moment didn't just hurt, it clarified everything. It showed me who would stand still when things got hard and who would step forward. Grandpa's decision didn't destroy anyone. It simply put structure where emotion had failed. That's what most family revenge stories really are. Not explosions, not screaming matches, not dramatic victories. Just boundaries. Just accountability. Just someone finally saying, "This stops here." In the military, you learn that leadership starts with responsibility. At home, it's no different. You can't outsource it. You can't assume someone else will carry it for you. And when you stop rescuing people from their own choices, you're not being cruel. You're being clear. If stories about family responsibility and real-life consequences speak to you, especially family revenge stories rooted in discipline and growth, make sure you subscribe to the channel. There are more real stories like this coming, and you won't want to miss them.